Welcome back to the REI Marketing Weekly. It's your host, Josh Culler. And today I've got a very special guest on the show. I've got Ian Horowitz on the line. If you guys haven't seen any of his content out there, as always, we're going to have everything linked down in the description below in the show notes. But he's got a great podcast that goes out there. A lot of good social media stuff. I actually came by way of knowing Ian in a non-traditional way because I actually work with a client who's very good friends with Ian and is on his stages frequently. So I knew you before we knew each other. It was one of those situations, but I'm happy to have you on the show, man. Welcome.
Yeah, you gave me the old, hey, I know you, but you probably don't know me. And I'm the, where is it going? What did I do? What bar were we in? What happened? Oh my God, because I can't recall you. And I'm like, all right, now the story makes sense. But actually, it's pretty fitting for your podcast of how we met, right? Because it's all about marketing in the end.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about like the connection points, which is one of the things that we'll talk about today. So Ian specializes specifically in self-storage, but he's been around the block with all kinds of other investing tactics. And I know a lot of the listeners that we have here are going to be wholesalers. Maybe you're starting off there, but you're looking into other opportunities to maybe do self-storage or maybe flips or any other kind of, commercial investments or whatever. I've had Daniil Clayman on the show before, and he was talking about how to raise capital for his massive developments that he does. And he only does like 4 or 5 deals a year, but they're massive deals. So one of the things that we're going to talk about that I'm actually really excited about because I'm curious to see the process that you go through with this. And I do think over the last couple of years, one of the common things that I've heard Ian in mastermind groups that I've been a part of, again, specifically working within the real estate investing space, is making sure that you have a Rolodex of capital at your disposal at all times and as much as possible, right? So one of the things that we'll discuss today is going to be raising private capital, which or maybe it's not private, it's just, hedge funds or whatever it is, but capital as a whole. So I know a lot of people get stuck on like, where do I even begin with this kind of thing? And it's not just the practice of raising capital, but you mentioned specifically to me that you have kind of like a system and a marketing tactics to raise the capital. So talk to me about that a little bit and let's go from there.
yeah, so I think to give it some context, yes, we have a big portfolio of real estate. It's approaching the 9-figure mark, right? But you guys got to remember, I'm just a dumb fireman. Me and my business partner were firemen for the city of Baltimore. You ever watch The Wire? It's all true. And I don't want to get into a big, deep founder story, but it does relate back to capital because as we were starting to do more and more projects in the single family space, small commercial, small multifamily space, it was like, listen, man, we're grinding away. We can only make so much money, but we need our friends and family to invest. And a good friend of mine, Jason over at Hard Money Bankers, I would talk to them all the time. And I was like, dude, you guys raise so much money. You got it all figured out. They're like, everything you have is right in your network. You just need to tell people about it. And I'm like, nah, dude, no, you guys got it figured out. I'm blue collar worker. You're white collar guys. Like you went to college. I didn't. You have all the right network. And they're like, dude, everything you need's in your network. You just need to put it out there. And you got to remember, like, we're very humble when it comes to what we do. In the fire department, it's 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 mouth for a reason. You sit back and watch. You don't brag about what you do. You let other people compliment you. So, here we are building a real estate portfolio, 2 firemen, and we have 100 single family houses at this point, and it's like, man, we did a lot, but we weren't telling our friends and family about it. So that was really the biggest problem when it came to raising capital, right? Like it was like we felt like we didn't know anyone, but then we finally got the right opportunity of buying a 76 unit apartment building. The lady was going to owner finance 90% of it. And the only reason we won that deal was because we wrote a book about what we were doing in the single family space. And we were marketing that book. And she's like, hey, I want to work with you guys. And the only reason people invested in that deal was because we were selling the book. We had credibility. We were starting to do some stuff on social. And people are like, you know what? I think you guys kind of got it figured out. And at that point, at that deal was really when it was like, wow, light bulb went off. We need to have case studies. We need to have a podcast where I can have long form content that we can go and break up. We need to have the email distribution list that allows us to build credibility and nurture everybody through this process. And I know I'm kind of all over the place because I don't really sit down and think about it because it's just like block and tackle stuff we do. Once a week, I go record a podcast. It goes to my editor. She cuts it up into reels. My other assistant, she books me on podcasts, but she also takes whatever podcast I did that week, does a summary email about it, and sends it to our whole database. And it's like, man, you don't realize how much you're doing and how much people actually want to hear from you. The same way in the fire department, people aren't like, hey, good job. They're like, you did your job, but people are always sitting back and watching you. And that's where the credibility comes, not only for raising capital, but also for earning deals. And I think it's, I wish I could conceptualize it a little better, but like it really becomes powerful. And once you start doing it, it's really simple to do.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say this too. One of the things I always tell people when it comes to, like, you're speaking my language because content is my thing, right? When it comes to content, it's not necessarily about like how many people you're reaching. It's the right people that you're reaching and the type of content that you've been putting out. Writing that book specifically dialed in the type of demographic that you're going to attract with that marketing, and that's why you're able to lock that deal up, and that's why it's built credibility for you and authority in this marketplace. And to be truthful too, like even like I wrote a book too, just came from the podcast, and being able to just hand that out as opposed to like a business card or anything, like that's a game changer. Like they got my branding sitting on their table and everything. I mean, do you see that too?
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. Like when you talk about authority figure, like I would go and speak at events. I don't know if I'm allowed to say the event, if you're transparent with your.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so Mike Wagner with the Storage Rebellion, I would get up there, I would get on his stage, I would speak, I would meet all these people, and yeah, we were there talking about self-storage, but what was happening? I was building credibility with inside of his group. So then when I had my first big deal, people wanted to invest with us. But what did I do when we left the stage and then when I asked for the money? The difference was, instead of me going in, and yeah, we provide some value inside Mike's group, and you can ask him, he'll tell you, I'm like the worst. Like I would go in there like once a month, just blow up a bunch of posts and then disappear because I'm not good in chat rooms. But what I did do was the highest quality people I met, I said, hey man, I would text them afterwards or email them and just be like, hey, give me your address. I got something for you. And I would send them a book. And as dumb as this sounds, it was like, yeah, it's about single family real estate. But what did it do? Yo, Ian wrote a book, and I put a little note in there and it would just say, hey, Josh, I just wanted to let you know that I enjoyed meeting you. I wrote this book when I was in the single family space. It's pretty cool. It's got some information about rentals, and I'm working on applying it to self-storage. Let me know if I can ever do anything for you. And I would mail it to them. And then what happens? A couple weeks later, that book shows up, or a couple days later, it shows up. Maybe they never read it, but you know what happens to it? It goes on their desk. And this is whether they bought it from me or I gave it to them for free. It goes on their desk and it sits in the corner. And then one day they're sick and tired of their job and they're like, that's it. Today's the day I'm going to go read a book and I'm going to learn about real estate. And they turn around and they see my book. And it's like, you know what? Ian was a pretty cool dude.
I was going to say, they almost feel guilty, like, I need to read his book as opposed to Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? Like, truthfully.
Yeah, or they go read my book, or they're like, you know what, man? Like, I read it, I get it, but I actually do like my job. How about I just invest money with Ian, right? Because, again, they're reading my backstory of how we got to where we are, and they watched us go from two dumb firemen to real estate investor, now working on commercial, and they're like, I can resonate with that. I want to support this story. And I think people, they lose value because, like, in this desk drawer is all my business cards, and they just sit there and collect dust. I don't ever look at them again. But every day I stare at these books, and it's like, oh, okay, like, yeah, Dan Martell, you know what? Today's a good day to go consume some of his content. And it's like, you know what? I might sign up for that guy. That just lives there, and it's like free marketing, and it's free recognition, and it just sits there, and it stares people in the face. And one day it might convert, one day it might not, but people have your book, right? And then the other side of that, the whole story to this is, let's say I do go speak on Mike's stage, and they go and say, you know, I really like what Ian said. I want to invest with him. I want to learn more about what he's doing. I want to buy a deal from him. I want to do something. And they go to look me up to make sure I'm a real person. And they start digging around and they stumble on social assets that everybody has. But then for some reason, Amazon has served them. Instead of going to my funnel page, they go to Amazon and it's on there and like, oh shit, Ian's on Amazon? Because like to the regular person, getting your product on Amazon is actually really hard in their mind, even though it's so stupidly simple. And it's like, wow, instant credibility. That dude's on Amazon. He must be selling a ton of books. Meanwhile, if I sell one book, 2 books a month, like, it's just whatever. It's out there. I don't push it as a main channel. it's credibility, and people will go, wow, you're on Amazon, you're on this, you're on that. And I think that's where the ball really starts to get rolling, because you're asking people to entrust you to invest money with you, whether it's single family, hard money lender, you're buying commercial deals, you want that broker to trust you, whatever it is. There's so many ways that credibility piece applies long term.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing that I want to point out about everything you said that I want the audience to listen to, because I try to hammer this in anytime we talk about credibility, content, and authority making, is Ian not once mentioned like his objective was to sell like 2,000 books a month or something like that. Like he didn't even mention like how many books I want to sell. The objective was getting that book into the right hands. And I think that that's what a lot of people miss, Ian, is when they're trying to create content. Maybe they start a podcast, they start posting on social media, and then they start looking at those vanity metrics and deciding if that's going to be the success factor to the marketing that they're doing or not. Whereas, like, if you have 100 people, I use this example all the time. Like, if you're a real estate investor trying to put a video out into, on social media and trying to generate motivated seller leads, if you get 100 views, but that one viewer of that 100 brings you a deal and says, like, this was, I watched this video and made me bring this deal to you because I liked your video, and it generated a $25,000 wholesale deal. Was that video successful? Well, in the eyes of everybody on the outside, it'd be like, well, Ian, you only got 100 views on your video. And then, well, it made me money. It made me a lot of money, in fact. So to me, that's the thing, that it's the intentionality of the marketing itself, right?
Well, let's think about this and frame it up even deeper, right? Like, and I'll give you my social stats on Instagram and tell you how pathetic they are. But let's go back to the book first. I went on Upwork. I found a ghostwriter. I think I paid her maybe $3,000 total to put this book together. Ads, everything else that I did, I probably lost money, right? But that
on the production of the book.
The production of the book,
yeah.
Right? Like I didn't make a lot of money back, right? And then I tried selling it and coaching. It's not really my jam. I sold a couple hundred books, whatever, a couple upsells, but it wasn't a business, right? Like it was a fun little hobby. But that one book allowed us to buy a $5 million property, a 76-unit apartment building. The lady owner financed 90% of it, so $4.5 million. I raised $1 million from my friends and family, right? Again, with the book. And then we refinanced that property 16 months later for $7 million. And we literally walked away with almost $2 million in our pocket between us and our investors. And what did I do the next day? I quit our job. And if I would have just said, oh, writing this book, I'm going to get millions of people to buy it. And then I went out to do it and it didn't do that. And I shut it down and I took it off all the social platforms and I didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
And if I did all these things for it, and I didn't execute on that, I wouldn't be sitting here today, right? Like that was the deal that allowed me to make my move. And to put all that into context, I got 1,700 people that follow me on Instagram, and it's not that big. And I got 1,078 posts. So that tells you I'm cranking content, but my page ain't growing. But I get a couple hundred views a video, right? And it's just about the right eyeballs. I don't need a million. Yeah, does it feel good internally to be like, oh, I got 1 million people following me? Yeah, it's cool, right? Like I got a fun meme page that's got hundreds of thousands of followers, but what does that do for me other than stroke my own ego? I care about getting the right eyeballs to do the right thing, that want to follow and be a part of our journey, right? And I think that's what's important. And I guess the big thing, the difference between a book and social media is instant gratification. The book, you got to grind it out. And the only way you're getting eyeballs is by sales. And I think that's harder for people to understand. And that's why it's like, oh, well, I'm just going to crank social content because that's the fastest way to fame. When in reality, it's just doing the block and tackle stuff. Stay your course, do the simple things, and be memorable,
Interrupting this podcast episode to tell you guys that this podcast is managed and produced by Color Media Productions. Yes, shameless plug, that's my company. However, we do this for a lot of other people as well. Most people that we work with are in the real estate investing space. So if you're listening to this podcast specifically, you probably are a real estate investor, given it's called the REI Marketing Weekly. If you're somebody that either wants to start a podcast or you have one going and it's becoming a little bit of a hassle, you're looking to transition to somebody that works a little bit better with a fluid motion in terms of you get the recordings done and then they do everything else. Well, that's what we do. We do fully managed podcasts from start to finish, video, audio, show noting, the graphics, publishing, everything that goes into it. It's a full service business that we run here in a service for you as a real estate investor if you are running a podcast. Additionally, we also do social media and YouTube management as well. So all of that being on the organic side, if you are interested in learning more about working with us and just recording content with guidance and strategy set by myself personally, and then not doing anything else after that, where we're taking care of everything from start to finish, then make sure you go check us out at cullermedia.com, CULLER media.com. Hit us up there and we can learn more about working together, hop on a phone call and see what we could do for you. Now back to the episode. Yeah, of course. But one of the things I would point out too is like there are parallels, because if we're talking about a book and social media, podcasting, YouTube content, email content, whatever it is, like anything that you're putting out that would be content related, it is still a driver of authority and credibility for your marketing. And regardless of the way that you chop it up, because it is still important for me to put content out, but also have a book, but also have a podcast, but also have a YouTube. So you might be listening and like we've been talking about a book for the majority of the time. You might be listening and be like, oh, Josh, does that mean I got to go write a book? No, not necessarily, but there's ways that you can still establish the same principles that we're talking about with the book through other types of content and through other mediums. And to be frank with you too, I mean, Ian spent a little bit of money, a little bit of time and effort to put something out like that. Like I have a friend of mine who, it's probably been like 3 or 4 years ago. He specifically markets to probate leads. Like that's his thing, probate leads in Atlanta. And he crafted a book. He called it a book, but it's more like a little pamphlet type thing. And it like every time he went to an appointment, he just left that on their table, and that was sitting next to all the postcards that were there that have nothing but advertising, but his little pamphlet had all the resources of the process of going through probate and how to handle it and that sort of thing. And that's how he locks up deals.
That's actually really, really clever. A good one I heard yesterday is like email marketing for like deals you don't do. I thought that one was clever. But it was the same thing, right? Like as I spoke more and more on Mike's stages and other stages, I said, okay, well, I have his book called Subsidized. It's about single family rentals, how to do them, Section 8 rentals, right? And I talked about our journey and our story of what works and what doesn't. But now here I am speaking on stages talking about self-storage. So I went back to the same copywriter. I said, here's all the presentations I did, which you probably watched. And I said, hey, ghostwriter, can you take this, turn this into a white paper? I don't want to do a full-blown book. And she said, well, why? I said, because I don't want to sell it. I don't want to do it. I want it as a simple download, right? So then I go and speak on Mike's stage. It's like, hey, or whoever's stage, by the way, you want to learn more about self-storage, who we are, what we do, use this QR code and scan it and download this white paper for free. And that cost me $750 for her to write it and make it like grammatically correct. And it was like, it's just like, it's so, like, there's a different thing for each one, right? Like I've spoken at events where I've shown up and printed that white paper out and gave everybody a copy. Dude, it cost me $500 at Kinko's to put together a couple hundred pamphlets or whatever it was. And I left one on every single person's chair, goes in their suitcase. They get to the airport and they're reading it going, this guy's relatively smart. Let me reach out, right? Like, I mean, just from Mike's group alone, just doing those few things, speaking on stage, having authority, giving something out for free. I mean, I raised well over 7 figures with inside of his group as a paying member, right? So it makes sense. And I think it's really hard for people, especially because I know I come from this world. It's like hard to put that content out. It's hard to come up with the ideas. Like I've been in a Horowitz kick recently, and you listen to that guy and you're like, that dude's on another level. I can't keep up. But like in reality, like I don't necessarily need all that. I just need a piece of content to send out to somebody. And you can just be having a bad day. I had a horrible day investing in real estate. Just wanted you guys all to let know. I had a bunch of pipes freeze. It's the trials and tribulations of running a real estate business. Just want to let you guys know, whatever, and send that out to your email database. You know what people are going to do? They're going to reach out and say, hey, I fixed my problem by doing this. Or, yo, dude, you're gangster. Like, how do I get involved with you? Like, I'd never be able to handle that. Or, hey, I got this property I want to sell because my pipes froze too. Just tell people what you're doing. I always thought you had to create this story, but in reality, you just need to tell people what you're doing.
Yeah. And the reason why what you're explaining in that example works is because of one word. It's the most important word in marketing, and that's relevance. You're creating relevance in some way, bridging a gap to the demographic you're going after. And whether that relevance means like that person is aware of the situation you went through because of the story that you told them in that email, and then they realize like, yo, I could never handle that. Like, kudos to you, man. And the relevance bridge that is created there, relevance creates bond and relationships. And that's why leads convert in the first place, is because what you have to offer them or what you have to fulfill as a need for them, it's relevant to what they need and relevant to the, you know, the problem that they're going through, which for you, for capital, it might be they don't have a place that, you know, they're aware of or comfortable with parking their money in. So then they meet you, they become aware of you, the way you run your business, through the book, through the content you put out, they listen to your podcast. Because, you know, like you might be able to tell me this even better, but I'm dead sure that if an investor comes around and is going to invest $500K or $1 million with you on a deal, they're probably checking you out, and it's probably through your content.
Yep.
And it's no different than anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, it's the $25,000 guys, it's the $50,000 guys. And what I was going to say that goes along with this is like all of our traffic drives back to equitywarehouse.com. That then is a funnel, real simple, Russell Brunson, ClickFunnels. You go on there. Hey, how do you learn to co-invest and co-lend with Equity Warehouse? And then I take you through a bunch of case studies. I tell you about that 76-unit apartment building. I tell you about the $12.5 million self-storage facility that we bought. I tell you about Gaslight Square, that's this beautiful asset in Baltimore City, right? And people are like, oh, I can resonate with that. Oh, I can lend with him. But yeah, they're going through this funnel their whole time. They're going, too good to be true, too good to be true, too good to be true. Wow, Ian's got a podcast. Well, I went to Ian's podcast, and now it's like, man, I'm getting served all of Ian's reels. God damn, the guy's like everywhere. Like, dude must be legit. And I think an important thing to say when you're talking about relevance is also authenticity. Right. It's transparency. People can see through the bullshit more and more now, especially as more and more content's being produced and it's more prevalent, or it's in your face every day. I don't know the right word for it. Right. But like TikTok, you can sit there and scroll all day. Instagram, you can sit there and scroll all day. People can see through the bullshit in like seconds, and it's not stuttering over words. You got professional bullshitters out there and you're like, yeah, that dude's not legit. But like, you went through my funnel. Or you got here's a good example. You got my ebook because you went to one of Mike Wagner's events. You saw me speak on stage. You had this thing that sat on your desk. You picked it up one day. You said, let me go check them out. You go to equitywarehouse.com. By the way, guys, like I have no follow-up nurturing email other than you just go to my email database. I don't put you through like 10 days of like hell of like, I'm going to spam the shit out of you until you call me. I'm sorry. I don't mean to curse on your podcast. You're good. Yeah, I figured you would have cut me off by now, but it's like I don't even have a nurture sequence off my website. It's like I just want you to go to my email database, and one day you're going to show up, right? So then think about that. They went to Wagner's class, they got my white paper, then they went to my website, and then they're like, I'm not going to do anything with this. And then 2 months later, you get an email from me. By the way, my assistant writes my emails because she just views my podcast. And then she types it up. She makes sure I like that it's written in the way I would speak. And then she sends it to our email database. And that person goes, oh, that's interesting. Then they consume my whole podcast. They're like, dude, you talk with really good guests. You and Jason talk about a lot of really good things. Then they see all the reels off of that. And they're like, oh, I remember hearing that podcast. Man, Ian really had a good point. Like that reel is great. Or I remember that guest. And then they finally book the call, right? And they're like, hey, man, I've heard everything you talked about. Really want to get started in real estate. I don't think I have the time to do it. I enjoy being a doctor, or I enjoy my job, whatever it is. I'd rather just invest money with you than invest it in the stock market. And that's really what it is. It's that whole time frame of being an authoritative figure inside of a room on a subject that I'm willing to talk about, giving them something to take home, driving them to a piece of somewhere online to capture their email address, and then finally, my drip campaign is not as nurturing as other people's. My drip campaign is eventually I'm going to run back into you, and we're going to have that conversation. And right time, right place, and people. So when they pull out their, as you guys say, pull out their credit card, they pull their wallets out and they say, okay, I'm ready to do this. I'd like to dip my toe. What's the next step? Well, let me add you to my investor database. Now they get a whole new set of nurturing emails that says, welcome to our database. Sign up here. This is how you sign up. Here's our deal flow. Now they're starting to consume all of our old deals. By the way, some of them are familiar because they're on our case study page that they started, right? It's all familiarity. It's all true stuff, and it all connects. And I think if you take someone down that journey and make it relevant to them and an experience that they remember and they don't feel pressured, I think that's really important when it comes to raising capital in general.
Yeah, that's amazing. Dude, this has been so great. One of the things I want to kind of end off here with, the answer to my question is probably somewhere within the last 24 minutes that we've been recording. However, I want to formulate it into like step number 1. So, investor is looking to raise capital and maybe has never done it before. What would be the first couple of steps that you would say, here's what you need to do in order to make the move to be able to do that? Maybe they have a deal locked up. Maybe they're starting to, they know I need to start raising capital because I have more deals coming down the pipeline that I'm going to need this for. What would be your ABCs to get going?
Yeah, I would say there's a few things here. One is we're not going to get into the intricacies of taking somebody's capital, but you do have to remember, like, Josh goes and invests with me, and that's like his hard-earned money, right? So I need to be a fiduciary of that. But what I would say is and even if you haven't done a deal yet, build out a case study, build out something that you can show people of how it would work. So let's use the single family space because it's a little more easy to understand. You want to buy a single family house for $100,000, you're going to put $50,000 into it, and it's going to be worth $200,000. And you go to the capital investor and you know you're going to borrow money from a hard money lender. But instead what you do is you show them, hey, you could be the hard money lender and I'm going to treat your capital exactly the same way. And you build out that whole case study and you educate them on it. And I think that's the number one thing that you can do is build out case studies of things that you can explain of how they worked, how they happened, and show them, right? The more deals we did, the more case studies I could give. But up front, when I was trying to raise capital, it was like, hey man, like even 10 grand would help me out, right? So you put 10 grand into a deal and I only had limited case studies. Hey, on these 2 deals, this is exactly what worked for me. I put my 10 grand in here and I want to show you how my 10 grand was treated the same exact way that I would treat your $10,000, right? And you show them that. And then from there, what's the nurture campaign? The number one best nurture campaign you could do, you get through this whole case study, whether you meet in person, they call you, you're doing a Zoom, whatever it is. The number one thing you could do is when they say, hey, well, I really want to, they say, well, how much capital do you need? The best thing you could do is create the fear of missing out and say, hey, I'm very well capitalized right now. I'll let you know when I can fit you into a deal. They come up. So I want you to learn all about this deal. Make sure you're comfortable because the next time it comes up, we got to move quick because they fill up really, really, really fast. And you could be so damn desperate for that money, but you need to stay in control and you need to have the frame control to be like, all right, I'll let you know. And then, maybe a couple of days later, what you could say is, hey, I had an investor drop out. I know I showed you that deal. Is it something that you would be interested in investing in? Don't sell your soul. Too many people sell their soul right away because they're so desperate. They've done this beautiful presentation and they've nurtured this guy all the way through. And then the guy's like, well, I want to change the terms. It's like, well, no, these are my terms. I want to do this. No, I'm in control of this deal and I want to show you how it works for me and my system. And that's why pushing back and saying we're well capitalized. And I'll give you a prime example. Yesterday on my podcast, I interviewed a guy and at the end, he's like, hey man, really good conversation. Impressive what you guys have done. And he's doing a fund to fund model. And he's like, I need to deploy capital. Are either of you guys interested? And me and my buddy who co-hosts with me, who's a hard money lender, go literally both word for word said, no, we're both relatively well capitalized right now. But if there's ever an opportunity in the future, we'll let you know. So then what I did was I went in my email. I said, so-and-so, and I set it up for 7 days later. And I just said, hey, we're producing your podcast right now. Reminded me to send you an email. Here's the last deal that we did. Let me know if this is something that would be a good fit in the future for you for your fund to fund model. And that's how I'm going to build and nurture that conversation. Because if I would have said yes right then and there, that dude would have been in control there on out and would have dictated terms because he knows I'm desperate for money. Don't act desperate. Look, I was not great in the bars and all that fun stuff, but those that are usually good at attracting the opposite sex, this is the number one way to do it. It's the same thing, right? It's all sales. Figure it out. and it will put you down. It will take you through the correct fashion of raising capital the right way and getting the investors that truly want to support you, that aren't doing it for a cash grab, that don't want to dictate you. They want to be on your team because they've gone through your process.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, that was incredible. I think the crossover between sales and marketing goes hand in hand with that full kind of layout that you gave, right? So I mentioned to you before we hopped on this recording that we talk about sales sometimes, we center around marketing, we talk about sales quite often. And a lot of the points that you were making was basically selling yourself without selling yourself.
Yep, 100%.
So, I mean, that's truthfully what this process looks like. And it's establishing good relationships with people. And then, of course, beforehand, building your authority and credibility. So, man, this has been fantastic. I appreciate you giving everything that you have today. I definitely got to have you back again soon. I believe I'm going to be on your podcast here shortly. So I'm excited about that. If somebody wanted to reach out with you, I know we got the podcast, the Real Estate Reserve, and then you got some socials, Instagram, and then I know that for Equity Warehouse, you have a website for people to go to. What's the best way for people to connect with you, get to learn more about you, potentially work with you? What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, come into the funnel. No, I'm kidding. EquityWarehouse.com is the best place if you want to learn how we co-invest and co-lend with our friends and family, and you can see those case studies. And what I would tell anybody is, if you're trying to do this, go hack ours, right? Like, that's Russell Brunson's whole conversation. Just go hack what we're doing. It's working. I'm sure you can build a better funnel than me, but guess what? Mine works, right? And it's up there and it runs. If you want to see what we're doing socially, just go check out Equity Warehouse on all the major platforms. We're out there. We put out content. I communicate the most on Instagram if you want to DM us. And then other than that, yeah, Real Estate Reserve podcast. Can't wait to have you on. I'm excited because we really enjoy the marketing conversations. They're fun to have because it's a piece of the business in real estate that a lot of people do not take seriously, because the barrier to entry to getting deals is super easy, but it is really a deep topic that we enjoy talking about. So I'm looking forward to having you on there.
Yeah, for sure, man. Guys, everything that he mentioned and everything I mentioned there too will be linked down in the description below in the show notes. So make sure you go check that out. Ian, this has been fantastic. Appreciate your time. Appreciate everything that you gave here. And I look forward to having you back again soon, my friend.
Hell yeah. Appreciate you, brother. Thanks.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining in and listening. If you haven't already, make sure you have subscribed to the show. Share this around with some friends if you think this would be beneficial to them. And once again, check out every single link down in the description below. Connect with Ian and everything that he has going on. Make sure you subscribe to his podcast as well. And then if you haven't already, make sure you have followed me and checked out my social media and YouTube channel, putting out content every single week on upping your content game and social media presence, podcasting, YouTube, whatever it is that you have going on in the content space. So make sure you go check that out. Thank you guys for listening and joining today, and we'll catch you on the next one. See you later.